All right, it is time to get started. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Red Wolf webinar. We are really excited that you've joined us to learn more about the American red wolf and how you can help this species. My name is Christopher Lyle, and I'm the program coordinator here at Wolf Park. We are located in Battleground, Indiana, and have a three-part mission of research, education, and conservation. And we focus primarily on wildlife that is either historically or currently native to Indiana. I'm also joined by Tracy Davids, the Southeast Program Coordinator for Defenders of Wildlife, and Ben Prater, who is the Southeast Program Director for Defenders of Wildlife. We are going to be covering an update on the wild red wolf population, discussing Wolf Park's recent advocacy efforts on behalf of the red wolf, and concluding with showing a short new documentary on the red wolf before opening up for some Q&A periods with our panelists. If you think of any questions as we are going through this presentation, please type them in the Q&A chat rather than the normal chat feature, and we will sort through those at the conclusion of the webinar. But before we launch into the meat of the webinar, if I can get this to the next slide, there we go. I do want to do a brief introduction on the American red wolf for those of you who are unfamiliar with its history. So the red wolf is one of the most endangered canids in the entire world. Just like gray wolves, they were nearly wiped out through predator control programs in the lower 48 states. And this was before the Endangered Species Act came out in 1973, which then allowed for the red wolf and the gray wolf to be reintroduced into portions of their historic range. Prior to these predator control programs, the red wolf once ranged from Texas and Louisiana down into Florida and as far north as Pennsylvania. So they were across the entire southeastern portion of the United States, and they are the only wolf species who is solely native to the United States. Currently, red wolves can only be found in the wild in eastern North Carolina. Due to mismanagement, the wild red wolf population has recently plummeted, and to prevent the species from going extinct in the wild a second time, we are asking that people use their voices to advocate for the species and amplify the last howls of the red wolf. We are going to share how you can become a red wolf advocate later in this program, but for now I'm going to turn over the virtual mic to Tracy Davids, who is going to talk about Defenders' work in the Southeast, especially with the American red wolf.
Thank you, Christopher, and thank you for all the wonderful work that you and everybody at Wolf Park does. You are a terrific partner. We love working with you and we love what you do. And hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Davids. I'm the Southeast Program Coordinator for Defenders of Wildlife based in Asheville, North Carolina. And among other things, I help to lead wildlife outreach efforts for our Southeast field office. So just a little bit about Defenders. Our mission is to protect all native animals and plants in their natural communities, working on the ground, in the courts, and on Capitol Hill to protect and restore imperiled wildlife across the continent. Our work on the ground is the focus of our field conservation program that includes 6 field offices across the country, including here in the Southeast. Next slide, please. And the reason that we're here in the Southeast is because it has incredible biological diversity, but it also has few protected areas and a growing human population, which threatens this biological diversity. So within our region, we have 5 focal landscapes that help to set our priorities to have the most significant results in the region. One of those landscapes is the Southern Appalachians, which is a global hotspot for amphibians and freshwater fish. And then we have the Gulf Coast, home to the Gulf of Mexico whale and biodiversity hotspots like the Mobile-Tensaw River Delta. Then, of course, the Florida Panhandle, which is home to the gopher tortoise and sea turtles. And the Greater Everglades, home to Florida panthers, manatees, and lots of other species. And then finally, the Carolinas coast, which is home to the critically endangered red wolf, which of course is the subject of today's webinar. So we have been working to protect and recover the critically endangered American red wolf for decades. And we've used every tool in the activist toolbox, including legal advocacy, which is our hammer. In fact, the success of our legal advocacy is why there is still a small population of wild red wolves to talk about today. So I want to give you a little bit of background about our legal advocacy, just so that some of the population information that I give you makes sense. Back in 2015, we prevailed in ending nighttime coyote hunting, which put red wolves at risk and resulted in increased mortality. Unfortunately, this led to more indiscriminate wolf deaths when resentment from private landowners boiled over. In response, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service began to trap and remove wolves from private lands, which unfortunately increased the rate of vehicle mortality because wolves were trying to return back to their territories. They also issued lethal take permits, allowing non-problem wolves to be shot. So we intervene again, and in response, Fish and Wildlife Service ceased all wolf management altogether, including monitoring and releasing wolves back into the wild. And this mismanagement continued to precipitate a decline in the wild population of red wolves. But nevertheless, we persisted and sued again to require the agency to resume releasing red wolves from captivity. And the good news is that in January of this year, we and partner organizations won a federal court ruling that required the Fish and Wildlife Service to prepare a plan to release captive red wolves into the wild again to avoid irreversible harm to this highly endangered population during ongoing litigation. As a result, this year, there were 8 additional red wolves released into the recovery area. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about these releases. Our captive breeding partners are critical to the recovery of red wolves in the wild. And really the entire purpose of captive red wolves across America is to provide releasable populations of red wolves back into the wild. Since our litigation, 10 wolves in total were released into the red wolf recovery area, including 2 male wolves that were moved from St. Vincent National Wildlife Refuge in Florida, 4 adult wolves from SSP facilities, and 4 puppies that were cross-fostered from a litter in Akron Zoo, Unfortunately, many of these wolves have perished. 5 have died since the beginning of the year due to vehicle strikes. 1 has died from an unknown cause. We don't know why. And 1 was recently shot a couple of weeks ago by a landowner who believed it was stalking her chicken coop. So at this time, there is 1 remaining male wolf from St. Vincent's who is hopefully paired with a female in the Milltail Pack on Alligator National Wildlife Refuge. 2 puppies have been seen on camera with their adoptive mother. So we don't know, what's going on with the other 2 puppies that were released, but we know that 2 are with the adoptive mother. So it is estimated that there are currently between 15 and 17 wolves in North Carolina, but we know for sure that there are 8, but it could be up to 17. As sobering as that is, we've found hope through these challenges, and we'll be relying on other tools in our activist toolbox to change the situation, like outreach around road safety in red wolf country and coexisting with these animals. So that is the population update on red wolves. Back to you, Christopher.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, the current red wolf numbers are quite sobering, but just like defenders of wildlife, we at Wolf Park are finding and activating hope where we can. Although we do not have red wolves at this time at Wolf Park, because we are set up primarily as a behavioral research and education facility with socialized wolves, we are located at the edge of the historic range of the American red wolf. And because of that, and our mission to protect wild wolf populations, we do as much red wolf outreach and advocacy efforts as we can. We have about 20,000 visitors every single year to our facility, and we have youth programs for kids throughout the summer, from kindergarten to teenagers. And we have heavily focused this year on inspiring and empowering youth to advocate for imperiled wildlife like the red wolf. And advocating for anything can be pretty daunting. It means you're putting your voice out there for a population that cannot easily speak for itself. But advocating for wildlife or wild spaces can be even more daunting, especially for youth. Eco-anxiety and climate anxiety are becoming increasingly common terms used in the context of mental health, as well as in the environmental movement. And it seems to be disproportionately affecting young people. So at Wolf Park, we do believe that any wildlife education facility should empower and inspire visitors to raise their voices on behalf of imperiled wildlife. So before we talk about Wolf Park's recent advocacy efforts, we would like to hear from the audience about whether you have advocated for wildlife before. So let me launch this poll. I'll give just a few seconds for everybody to look through these and answer. There's a variety of ways that you can advocate on behalf of wildlife, and we'd like to hear if any of you have done any of these different wildlife advocacy methods. All right, still have a few answers coming in, it looks like. I'm going to end the poll now and share our results. So hopefully you all can see that. It looks like a wide variety of you have done some form of advocacy before, which is really great. So let me get to my next slide here. There we go. So this year at Wolf Park's summer camps, we wanted to include opportunities for youth to practice advocating for species and habitats and give them that skill set. Our primary focus this year was on red wolves for our advocacy activities. So we spent some time teaching kids about the red wolf and their conservation story before talking about how they can make a difference themselves. And depending on the age group, we facilitated letter writing or the creation of drawings and pictures. So these activities generated 22 handwritten letters in support of red wolf conservation from our teen camps and 60 drawings and pictures from our kindergarten through 8th grade camps. Each camp also participated in a group video as well, where they stated and held their support for red wolves. Defenders of Wildlife is going to be using these letters, images, and videos in their continuous efforts to guide policy in favor of stronger red wolf protections. And we were just blown away by some of the detailed letter writing that many of our campers produced. This letter, for example, discussed the benefit of wolves in the ecosystem as a keystone species, which is something that was not even included in the red wolf advocacy activity, but was just information they picked up through discussions and activities from other parts of the camp. And we have to share at least one of these group videos because they were really quite special, and some of the kids got very excited about howling in front of a camera.
1, 2, 3.
We stand with the red wolf.
One.
So our 2021 advocacy activities were quite a success, and we plan to use these as a model for future youth programs, including on-site programs like our 2022 summer camps, as well as in classroom outreach that we hope to be doing. We aim to create a hopeful generation of wildlife advocates who are empowered that their skills and their voices can make a difference. It's not only beneficial for youth to practice gaining these skill sets and feeling empowered, but it's also really essential for conservation organizations to amplify the voices of young people to help conserve species. We know that letters, images, and videos are all extremely effective in wildlife conservation, whether for trying to relist gray wolves on the Endangered Species Act or saving the vaquita. So I hope everyone is feeling inspired by the incredible youth that we've had come through Wolf Park over the past summer. We were very privileged to work with all of them. But I'm now going to pass off the virtual mic to Ben Prater, who is going to set the stage for the new Red Wolf documentary that we're going to see.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Christopher. It's with great pride that I'm here this evening to share this video with you all, and also to have been invited by Wolf Park. We really have enjoyed our partnership and all of Christopher's leadership over the years, including some of the support he gave us in our local campaigns to educate and inspire folks to get involved with red wolf conservation in North Carolina. And as part of that, in those partnerships, one of the most important partnerships that we have, but also that the Red Wolf program at large has, is with the Species Survival Program. And that was a program that was developed to actually help to rescue red wolves from the brink of extinction. The Fish and Wildlife Service actually took wolves out of the wild to jumpstart a population in captivity. And now we have nearly 45 facilities all across the country that care for and steward these wolves, working to make sure they protect their genetic integrity, that they're taking care of their health needs, and also doing what they can to keep them as wild as possible. And that, again, is because they have the goal, as you've heard Tracy talk about, of release these animals into the wild. And so with our SSP partners, we wanted to tell the story of red wolves, a way to engage our memberships, engage the larger public, and really to help people understand that the red wolf is a very interesting, fascinating conservation story, and deeply a part of our American history, even before this place was known as America. So with that, I'm delighted to showcase this film, and I hope that you find it both informative and inspiring, and I look forward to your questions once we get through this next 13 minutes. Christopher?
Have absolutely beautiful amber eyes. They execute their job beautifully, and all the beauty that they're made with. Every time they howl, I stop and listen. That is an endangered species, the most endangered canid in the world, howling.
When you see them, they're just moving through the woods so quickly, so stealthily, with that head low, those ears perked back. It's just an incredible sight to see as they just streak through the forest.
They have these small, intimate family groups. They take care of each other. There's a soul. There's a soul to that family group that I'm enchanted by.
I have always fallen in love with the way their fur looks. You are able to see each one of these animals' unique individualities. They all have personalities. It's one of the things that I think I notice more on our wolves than anything else.
When they look at you, especially when they catch the light in a certain way, they just have these beautiful eyes, and you can see something in that speaks to us really deeply.
The red wolf historically would have lived right here in Hamilton County. They are the only true wolf native to North America and living in the Southeast. meaning they would have been right here in our own backyard. When the settlers came over from Europe, they brought with them a lot of stories about, like Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, and the bad guy's always the wolf. People innately have a fear of wolves.
So early on, when the settlers came over here, there was an immediate fear of the animals and all the people that were on the land. So naturally, when you have fear of something you don't understand, you attempt to exterminate it or eliminate it and take it out of the way.
The American red wolf was the only native canid to the southeastern United States. Their historical range, as far as we know, extended all the way from southern New Jersey down through Florida and as far west as Louisiana and the Gulf Coast of Texas.
When settlers came, there was a natural fear of wolves. There was a natural fear of apex predators in general. The apex predator is the top animal in the food chain. In that era, people thought that apex predators should be exterminated.
When colonials arrived, they really took it upon themselves to vanquish the entire eastern seaboard of anything that gave them any sort of competition or run for their money. We have some historical records showing, disgusting levels of mass killings of wolves, offering prices for any wolf head or wolf tail a trapper could bring.
With that innate fear of wolves, right here in Hamilton County, Chattanooga was not immune from that. We do have historical documents of Hamilton County offering bounty on red wolf pelts.
And if you brought the hide in, they would pay you for that hide.
That was a really, really limited understanding of what predators and predator species really bring to the environment and the critical importance they play on the landscape. And it wasn't until the 1940s and 1950s that we really started to take notice that these animals had just totally disappeared and they were gone. No one could find them anymore.
We caused this animal to go into extinction. We need to fix the damage we did.
So in the 50s and 60s, they started trapping as many of the wild wolves as they could find to bring them into captivity and begin the Red Wolf Recovery Program.
One of the most fundamental policies, most fundamental law that guides the conservation and recovery of red wolves and other critically endangered species is the Endangered Species Act. This was really a monumental piece of legislation that for the first time recognized that organisms and animals and plants beyond our own selves, human beings, were important to our own well-being and were important to conserve for their own intrinsic value. So we have over 40 breeding facilities that steward red wolves with the intent of getting these animals out into the wild. And one of those places is in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
The Red Wolf Recovery Program here at Reflection Riding is a way for us to attempt to help rectify that injustice that was done by hunting those animals.
So we went from a founding population of 8 individual wolves just after 25 to 30 years to a population of between 130 and 150 individual animals.
Right now, the only place in the entire world you can find an American red wolf in the wild is in northeastern North Carolina. It is the only recovery area that we have as of right now.
We've continued to experience this downward trend in the population over the past 6 years where Fish and Wildlife Service has simply been hands-off, allowing the population to continue to decline and no longer releasing wolves from captivity. Due to the inaction of the agency, essentially hitting the pause button on a number of crucial aspects of the program, we've continued to see this population decline to the point now where there are probably no more than 10 to 12 individual animals on the ground.
We don't want to be doing this work. We don't want these wolves in captivity. The intention here is to bring that population up, reintroduce them on the landscape, and then let that population be self-sustaining. There's a really beautiful cycle where all of these varieties of species, there are many, many thousands just here in Chattanooga, all of those species evolve to work together and to keep things in balance. And we really see all kinds of benefits to apex predators being reintroduced onto the landscape.
They do so much to keep prey animals healthy. They keep herds, ungulate herds, very healthy by weeding out the sicker and smaller and weaker specimens in those herds.
It's all a perfect balance. If they were back in the wild the way we want them to, they would bring that back onto the landscape.
We've thrown that out of balance, and so it's our job, and it's a big part of what we do here to try to put it back in balance.
They truly are the balancers of the ecosystem. They provide a service that allows these other species to really thrive.
I'm of African American as well as Native American descent. And the Native Americans believe that all beings are connected spiritually. So in that honor, there was respect there. So they knew that you didn't throw off the balance. In African and Native American history as well, when they did have to go out and kill an animal or something along those lines, they kind of did like a ritual with it and celebrated and gave peace and gave thanks. If you study into both of the histories, they both were very spiritually connected to the land, knowing that there is a link between all things and everything is important and plays a crucial part.
Is it possible for humans and wolves to live side by side? And I mean, resoundingly, yes. I think red wolves, frankly, make it even easier because they're so reclusive.
If you take that apex predator out, then we have too many deer. And then the deer browse all the trees. And then the songbirds leave. And then we have wash because we have erosion because the trees aren't there to keep the land stable. And that's going to cause problems for our water.
The Tennessee River is one of the dirtiest rivers in the world. We know that now. It's one of the most polluted with microplastics in the world. If we look at the astounding freshwater biodiversity in the Chattanooga area, and we imagine an apex predator back on the land, you can imagine how much more healthy the Tennessee River might be if you had red wolves on the landscape.
So we've experienced the cusp of success for this program. Dramatically so. We've gone from 17 known animals in the entire world to over 130. So we have the experience, the knowledge, the science, the history that has allowed us to reach success. Now is the time to embrace that again, to really have a renaissance of thought going into this program, to get this program back on track. And then from there, we can start bringing the red wolf closer to the point of recovery.
We would really like to see a network across the Southeast of federal land holdings or protected lands where these wolves could really make their homes and have some sort of safety and security on protected lands, and then use corridors to disperse and travel between the packs and really do that genetic swapping that you would see on the natural landscape if there were enough animals to do so.
So wolves have an incredible capacity to survive almost anything we throw at them. What they can't survive are policies that undermine their conservation and intolerance and attitudes that perpetuate myths and falsehoods about the important role these animals play in nature. So we not only need to look at the biological landscape for this species, but also the policy, the legal, and the social aspects that will support conservation and recovery. So it's my hope that by the time my kids are my age, that we will have at least 3 thriving populations of red wolves in the Southeast, and that I will be able to take my grandkids out and hear wolves howl in the wild again.
I remember when I was 8 years old and I first learned what a red wolf was. And I remember feeling this really overwhelming sense of pride. One hope for the future would be that this species is around long enough for more little girls like me to find them and feel that overwhelming pride and happiness that a magnificent, incredible species was thriving.
We know that we can live with the red wolves and amongst any animals because my ancestors did it.
We envision a time in which people learn about the ecosystems, they learn how to manage their own land in a way that's restorative for all of these different species. Our own survival depends on all of the services that the ecosystem provides to us. let's end this program with the red wolves. Let's get these animals back out on the landscape so that we don't have to do this work anymore.
For this species, what success looks like is recovery. These animals thriving on their own accord. But we have to do the hard work now. We have the tools, we have the knowledge, we have the resources to get these animals back on the ground where they belong, to get back towards that future where we don't have to do this work anymore.
All right, I hope everybody enjoyed watching this new Red Wolf documentary. I can get it off the screen. It's such a great way for new people to learn about the species, and it was recently published on YouTube, so we encourage that you share this film with your own network. This webinar that you're currently watching is also being recorded, so that is a good way as well to share that with your own network so that more people can become Red Wolf advocates. And did you have anything you wanted to add at the conclusion of that webinar or that film?
Yeah, I'll just, I failed to mention at the beginning of it that our central partner for the production of this film was Reflection Riding Nature Center and Arboretum in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They're one of the leading partners of the SSP, and we were happy to do that partnership with them. And we were each compelled through our collaborative efforts to really just kind of want to tell the story. And I'm excited to have the chance to do that tonight because, again, as history moves along, there's just more to add, a new chapter every day, it seems. So glad to have all the support we can and look forward to answering your questions. And if you like, Christopher, if you wanted, oh, you got a poll. We'll get back to questions in a second. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So now after you've learned a little bit more about the Red Wolf, we want to hear from everybody about whether you are interested in advocating for the Red Wolf in any capacity. So give just a little while to let you answer that. All right, so I'm going to share those results. Thank you to everyone who is watching and interested in advocating or potentially interested in advocating for the Red Wolf. There's a lot of different ways that you can advocate for red wolves. We always encourage contacting your state representative to ask for stronger protections for red wolves and other imperiled wildlife. That is always one of the best ways that you can be an advocate for any wildlife. These species, like the red wolf, really needs help and needs Congress to back these programs that are funded by your tax dollars. Always asking for stronger protections for the Endangered Species Act will, across the board, help the red wolf and other wildlife. As mentioned, you can share this webinar with your friends and family once it is published on YouTube. You can share the Red Wolf documentary film that we just watched. And you can also contact any of today's panelists for more information about becoming a Red Wolf advocate. So there's the contact information for myself, Ben, and Tracy. And we would love to open it up for any Q&A, anything that you all are interested in learning more about, whether the Red Wolf or how to become more of an advocate. It looks like we already have some questions coming in. So I will field these, and whoever is most appropriate or wants to jump in and answer can go for it. So the first one is, what is the population of people in the area in North Carolina where red wolves currently are?
Yeah, great question. It's a very interesting location. It's a 5-county area that makes up a location of North Carolina called the Albemarle Peninsula, which is about 12,000 square miles. It's actually quite sparsely populated. with most of the population concentrated along the Outer Banks or along the coast. But in total, just on pure census numbers, you're looking at about just over 100,000 people or so. That what's also interesting about this location is that those population numbers are actually going down or remaining static. So unlike a lot of places, particularly North Carolina and the Southeast, we're not seeing a huge pressure as large populations are moving into relocating and creating more development. So the only real threat for habitat loss that the red wolves face is unfortunately due to coastal sea level rise. But the good news is, and I know I'm going on a little bit here, the great news about wolves is they're honestly quite generalist when it comes to the habitats they need. While the prey items they tend to go after or can be somewhat specific, as long as there's a place that white-tailed deer and rabbits and mice and squirrels can thrive, so can red wolves. So they're not picky, but the habitat that they do have is important to protect because it's what they have now. But we're always looking to expand that. And quite frankly, Northeast North Carolina is still a prime site to do that for a lot of those reasons. Mainly the population is so low. So thanks for that question.
Right, and I'll take us off screen sharing so everyone can see our faces a little bit better, feel a little bit more personal on Zoom. The next question is, how do you choose when to release and choose which facility to release wolves from?
Great question. Well, the we in that sentence is going to be the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in direct partnership with the 40 plus facilities that we mentioned that are a part of the what has been known, I should say, as the Species Survival Program. It is about to undergo sort of a branding change. Now it's going to be called the SAFE program, the Save Animals from Extinction program, as put forward by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums and Accreditation Service. Or society, I should say, not a service, system, I think is the right S word I was looking for. But regardless, those cooperators meet annually to coordinate on how the wolves are doing, any health issues, as well as who should breed with whom, where wolves should go, who has more space. I will say one of the interesting dynamics we had over the last few years is that we were running out of space. Wolves do a great, they breed well. They're not like panda bears. We can put wolves together. If they get along well, the result is usually some young pups. And of course, those litters are between 3 to 9 pups. So we're growing the population quickly, which means we can grow it quickly in the wild as well if we get more animals out there. But the SSP facility is running out of room. So there's a big push over the last few years to provide additional spaces, additional facilities. And it had the added benefit of now we've got a lot of animals that we hope will be eligible for releases now that the Fish and Wildlife Service is finally getting back on track and recommitting and rededicating their efforts towards recovery and getting more wolves on the ground. So we're quite hopeful that with the growing stock and the dedication of advocates like yourself, we'll get to see this program really reach a renaissance.
Awesome. And we have some questions asking if wolves are being released right now, currently, and also if there are plans to introduce them to other parts of their historic range besides Northeastern North Carolina.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take these as well. So as a matter of fact, Tracy did a great job of outlining our legal advocacy. And one of those steps that are involved once you settle a legal case is you have to go do status conferences with the court to see how things are proceeding. We actually have one of those conferences coming up this Friday. And Friday is a deadline for Fish and Wildlife Service to make their release plan public as well. So we are hoping that we will see those documents coming out of the court hearing on Friday, and we will see Fish and Wildlife Service commit to, we hope, getting at least 8 more animals this season out on the ground, trying to focus this time on having family groups so that they were more likely to hold territory and work together versus trying to disperse, looking for mates and partners and getting in trouble with roadways. So we're hopeful that we'll get more released. And Christopher, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question? Oh, more areas. Yes. So since the recovery plan was first drafted in the early 90s, the plan has called for a minimum of 3 self-sustaining populations across the historic range. The recovery plan is currently in the process of being updated, and we certainly hope that that goal remains true. But we also hope that we'll leverage more science and data to make better and more guided decisions about where these next locations will be. We, of course, have some ideas. What's really interesting at this point in red wolf history is that we know enough about their biology or ecology, which, remember, we took these animals out of their wild home. We had never really studied them. So most of what we've been doing for the past 30 years has been an experiment to say, and I think it's been a successful experiment. In fact, it's been lauded as one of the most successful recovery efforts of its kind up until recently, unfortunately. So I say all that just to mean that we're still learning a lot, and we've learned a great deal, and we should make more informed decisions based on that history. And one of the ways we're doing that is we know enough about red wolves now to understand that their biological constraints are not as restrictive. They can sustain and thrive in a variety of habitats, a variety of locations. I mean, you think about the entire Southeast region, they were across it all. So we know they can survive in a lot of variety of habitat, which gives us a lot of options for location. What is really challenging, though, is to look at through the lens, not only just the biological, but the sociological, the political. You know, what states have good enough wildlife protection laws in place for these animals to be managed in concert with federal laws, or how do they manage their coyote population, which we've seen conflict with management regimes in North Carolina. Are people excited about having this animal in their backyard? Part of the work that we have to do is make sure wherever these animals go that people are ready to welcome them there. Unfortunately, there's a high bar for sort of meeting that social demand to ensure that people are willing to coexist, which is a big part of the work we do. So I am hopeful that we'll have several more sites coming online, and they could be as far afield as Texas, where we pulled the original animals out of, perhaps Missouri. I also hope to continue in North Carolina, even perhaps in the Northeast of New Jersey and the Pine Barrens, where they have really good wildlife conservation laws. And really anywhere we've got a chance to see this animal succeed, we want to see those animals on the ground.
I also wanted to add, with regard to reintroducing more animals into the wild, as Ben said, we've got this meeting on Friday, and we're hopeful that it's going to result in more releases, but we're hoping that there'll be more puppy fostering as part of this, because I think that's where some more success is going to be. The animals that are being released are adults. They've been in captivity their entire lives. They don't understand roads. They don't understand vehicles. And so with puppy fostering, we have an opportunity to have captive wolves brought up in the wild who can better understand people and how to coexist with us.
Yeah, Tracy, I'm really glad you mentioned puppy fostering, because it's more than just a cute idea. It really works fantastically, and the work is made easy because, to be honest, wolf mothers are some of the best mothers in the animal kingdom. In fact, these the whole family unit. Again, when we talk about a red wolf pack, we're talking about a tight-knit family group, a male and female breeding animal, their offspring from the year before, and their offspring of that year, the new ones. And these fostered pups and adoptive parents take a liking to each other right away. We actually haven't had a circumstance where any of those situations have failed in the wild. Now, again, they do face a lot of threats, so they don't always survive to live long, fruitful lives. But as far as the adoptive parents taking those animals in under their paw, so to speak, we've had tremendous success with that. And the program that we talk about, puppy foster, was actually developed for the first time with red wolves, and now it's used for Mexican gray wolves and other species. So again, really kind of a cutting edge technique that we're excited to get back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had more questions about the release history for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, about why the service stopped releasing red wolves in 2010 and begun to kind of neglect the program. Can you touch on the why of that?
Yeah, I can try, and I'll be brief because this has been another, the last 10 years for red wolves have been very dramatic. But it's also, just to be fair, I will give you what I believe are reasons, but the real answers would have to come from the service themselves, and they've been a little hard to pin down on the whys of decisions they've made, which have been a little trouble. We've had trouble understanding as well. But essentially, after we started seeing challenges with liberalization of hunting regulations around coyotes, and red wolves were being put in harm's way, conservation community stepped up and said, look, we just can't allow the nighttime hunting of coyotes because it's causing the inadvertent poaching of red wolves. And we don't want the hunters and folks that want to manage coyotes to be punished for something that's not their fault. And we want to see this population succeed. Well, instead it became, we're against hunting, and we're against landowner rights and private property. So it just got spun out of control. And, as Tracy, I think she used the phrase, resentment boiled over. It certainly did. But it's important to recognize that resentment and kind of the hostility that both the agency and the groups like ours faced really only came from a few sort of sour, very vocal opponents. Overwhelmingly, when we've done surveys and we've done actual community meetings and actually talking to people that live there, because that's part of our work, we don't see that attitude persists beyond a very few loud mouths. To be totally frank. Now, unfortunately, those loud mouths also had some political influence and were able to essentially get the agency to kowtow to some of their demands, including taking a hard look at the program, whether it quote unquote could succeed, because not only could they not control coyotes, but without controlling coyotes, they would hybridize with red wolves. We know that, yes, that can happen, but it's not an existential threat to the integrity of red wolves if you have enough red wolves on the ground. So it just got kind of, run away with various forms of hubris and misinformation. And the service was trying to placate a few private landowners, and in doing so, began to sort of systematically dismantle the program, pulled back the number of staff they had working on it, started, finding room and wiggle room in their own rules to mishandle the animals in terms of, allowing landowners to shoot them versus, them having to have evidence of them being a problem first. And so we started to see this sort of deterioration of just good policy, sound management, and people power, quite frankly. And so through that time, we've had to step in and file litigation to try to get the program back on track. And when we essentially, and the court agreed with us that the things that Fish and Wildlife Service were doing were, against the Endangered Species Act and therefore illegal, the service took the dramatic step to say, okay, well, then we just won't do anything. And that is what left things kind of on hold for far too long. And it was very tough at that time because we were essentially getting blamed for shutting down the program when all we were trying to do is get them to do the program correctly. So fortunately, those days are behind us, but it did not, the population itself could not withstand not having more animals introduced and released, not having managers keep tabs on the animals, not having managers out on the ground talking to landowners, helping to support other local organizations like ours to do this tough work for coexistence. But I am hopeful now under this administration, under leadership we're getting out of Washington, that we can turn things around and we can get the regional leadership on board, do the right thing. And I think we're seeing evidence of that. It's coming out in drips and drabs. Friday been another big step. Today we also got an announcement that one of the rules they tried to move forward with that would have restricted the habitat and allowed for expanded poaching of these animals was vacated, is taken off the table, which is a great thing and no small victory. So, these things take time. And I think once we get past the politics, once we start recognizing our responsibility to these animals and to future generations, that I think we'll start making wise decisions and putting in the resources that it needs to succeed.
Absolutely. And we had a comment from somebody watching on our Facebook Live as well, who shared that he is a hunter and could say that he will never hunt wolves because they are very important to the ecosystem. I think that's a really important distinction to make, that not all hunters are out there wanting to kill wolves. Often hunters are some of the best conservationists because they're out there on the landscape. They see how interconnected things are. And that's a distinction I think Wolf Park and Defenders always tries to make, is that there's a big difference between people on the landscape seeing the interconnectedness versus people who are just wanting to either hunt a trophy in the case of a lot of gray wolf hunts, or people that just have a lot of misconceptions about red wolves, as in the case of Eastern North Carolina. We also have some questions related to the area still, as well as with coyotes. So kind of a two-parter, because they could probably both be easily answered. How much acreage in the recovery area is protected? And also within the recovery area, how do wolves deal with competition from coyotes and other predators?
Yeah, great question. So to give a little bit more of the geography, so in the area, one of the things we talked about, what makes a good site, a good candidate site for releases. Well, one of those things is a large connected complex of public lands, federal public lands, to be more precise. And that's important because the Endangered Species Act functions a little more heavy, a little more full-throated, I should say, on federal landscapes. Agencies have a higher level of duty and requirement and responsibility because those are the lands that are for these animals, quite frankly. So they do have to balance some needs, but when it comes to wildlife refuges, it's all about the wildlife. And so they have a lot of sort of management tools in the toolbox. The great thing about the Albemarle Peninsula is it has large, diverse complex of federal, state, and private conservation lands. I would say probably at last count, unfortunately, it's still probably no more than maybe 20 to 25%, which I would say fall in that protected category. But it's important to realize that, these animals, they don't understand lines on maps, right? I think one of my quotes is, wolves don't read maps, and it's true. So their protection, almost like a halo, has to go with them wherever they go. And for red wolves, that means that, if they leave these refuge lands and go on private lands, those protections do extend to that animal. However, again, as I mentioned, the laws are stronger on public land. When they move on to private land, the law gets a little bit squishy because in this country, I think rightfully so, we don't want to infringe on private property and rights to utilize that property. So there are loopholes that if you believe that an animal is causing a problem, whether it's, in the case we see classic case out west where, a wolf pack is taking out sheep or someone's cattle. We don't see that in red wolf country. Let me be very clear about that. But let's say in this recent case, we had a wolf that was sniffing around a chicken coop. That landowner felt that was a threat to their lives and property and, took matters into their own hands. And they have every right to do that based on the way the law reads. So it's very important that these animals have enough protected land, enough federal land, which is the most protected and restricted, to survive, to thrive. And there are other ways to support these animals when they leave federal lands too. In fact, Canada has a really unique program that no matter where wolves end up, wherever they are, it immediately includes a zone that no hunting or trapping is allowed. So that way these animals are free to move about the landscape because they don't know that the policy is different over here than over there. And that's really unfair to we kind of, blame the animal for that. But in truth, we should do everything we can to protect the animals wherever they are. So yeah, it's complicated. And what was the next part, the competition?
Yeah, so what kind of competition are red wolves facing from coyotes and other predators? How do they deal with that?
Yeah, well, I think you heard Tish say it a few times, red wolves are considered apex predators. They're really top of the food chain. So once they get to a certain size, and I don't mean to be flippant, but, really the only thing they have to worry about are minivans and shotguns. To be fair, they do compete with each other. Most predators do. They compete for space and prey with coyotes, but they outmatch a coyote 10 times out of 10, which is why it's important to have a robust population of red wolves. In fact, for folks that believe coyotes to be problematic, I don't. I love them, one of my favorite animals. but they're not always considered a positive asset. But the best way to control, to use that term, coyotes, is to have a healthy, robust population of red wolves. These are animals that will steer clear of your home and habitats. So they really don't have any direct predation. Is funny enough, red wolves have succumbed to being eaten by alligators. So kind of a battle of the titans, if you will. But just like anything, wolves do live hard lives since they do have to hunt. They're susceptible to injury, to disease, to starvation, heat, whatever it may be. I mean, wildlife is not always an easy life, but these wolves have a tremendous capacity for survival and something we can really be inspired by.
And as the red wolf population has continued to decline, the coyote is filling that niche, right? And so we're seeing more coyotes move into, places they weren't before because they're filling that niche the red wolf once filled. So if we had a more robust red wolf population, it would help to keep the coyote population in check.
Absolutely.
Yeah, important to note too that I don't think Ben mentioned this yet, or Tracy, but we never even used to have coyotes in North Carolina at all. It's not a historically native species to North Carolina or Indiana, where Wolf Park is situated. They used to just be found in the western portion of the United States, but due to all of the predator extermination campaigns targeted on wolves, coyotes had a lot of room to expand and have expanded into every state except for Hawaii, because as we joke at Wolf Park, they can swim, but not that well. Pretty much all over the place because they don't have their natural competitor, the wolf. So building more robust wolf populations, as Tracy mentioned, is going to eliminate a lot of potential habitat for coyotes. And we have a few good questions to kind of round us off, more focused on advocacy and how people can help. So the first is there one political action that is more important than others in terms of letter writing versus phone calls versus signing petitions? What do you all think?
I'll let you take that one, Tracy.
I think it depends on what's going on, right? I think you should do, whatever is happening at that time. And sometimes, it's a petition. Sometimes it's a letter. Sometimes it's a letter to the editor. So it really just depends. I think, they're all important and they're all helpful and useful. It just depends on what the particular need is. Yeah. And that's why it's really good to stay informed, keep up to date with groups like Wolf Park and Defenders of Wildlife, join our Facebook groups, our social media, so that you can keep up to date on, the most recent advocacy efforts, because sometimes we need responses quickly. And that's really the fastest way to get the word out. So we encourage you to keep up to speed with what's going on with wildlife conservation, so that you can act when we need you to.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say that generally I think about things in terms of the big P politics, so how you're engaging with decision makers and government agencies, but that's where comment letters, petitions, calls to your representatives come in handy. But don't underestimate the small P politics. In fact, so much of what we see for successful conservation rests on the ability of us to communicate where people are and talk to them in real terms. And a lot of what we find is really helpful is having folks that can be ambassadors in their own community, whether it's their congregation at church, which we've worked on with Christopher to do that at some local churches, or, whatever hobbies or community groups you're involved with, friends, family, ask the question, talk to folks about what you learned about red wolves, pass the knowledge on. That's really important, because nothing frustrates me more than to realize that people who live in North Carolina, many of them still don't even know that red wolves exist. I think that's almost criminal that we have this animal that we could really be taking such deep pride in and showcasing and celebrating is just an incredible part of our natural history that's still here. And few people know about it. So, the way that changes is for everyone to know about it. And then once we have that, then the, capital P politics become easier. But I will also, then also don't get discouraged. Recognize that you have many talents and all of those can be leveraged to, match your passion for caring and protecting wildlife. We've worked with artists, songwriters, storytellers, poets, all kinds of folks who just want to do something, and we can always find an avenue and an outlet to put your energy and your passion to benefit wildlife. So be creative.
Yeah, and an easy thing to do would be to share the film that you just watched.
Absolutely.
With friends and family.
Share the film, share the webinar, and if you have any questions about how your own skill set can be applied to help any wildlife, especially the red wolf, again, you can contact any of us kind of on the virtual stage here, and we would be happy to talk through some ideas. A couple last questions. This one is for either of you, Ben or Tracy at Defenders. The comment is, with education of our younger generation being so important, does Defenders have any plans for educational materials for camps or classrooms similar to what Wolf Park has done this summer?
Absolutely. Yeah. Tracy, why don't you tackle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We are currently putting together a program to develop educational materials, a curriculum that will be for elementary school kids that we're hoping to launch in this coming year. So we're hoping to reach youth and get the word out with them. And we're also looking to translate a lot of our materials into Spanish. There are a lot of Spanish speaking people in the Red Wolf territory. And so we're also hoping to, translate these materials and PowerPoint presentations and webinars into Spanish so that we can reach just a large segment of the population that we've not reached out to before. But yeah, doing the hiring an educational consultant this coming year to put together the curriculum is something that we're really excited about. And hopefully that'll have a really robust online component too. And we'll focus on rural communities where wolves may be considered for reintroduction. So.
Yeah, excited to see this develop with Defenders. And final question is, how does someone support the effort hands-on in the field and within local governments? Is there someone that they can contact to have an extended conversation?
Yes, I would encourage you, if you're in North Carolina. I think, we have a representative body, the North Carolina Wild Resources Commission. I would say, feel free to contact your commissioner. You may find you'll have a very interesting conversation talking about red wolves. But as far as getting involved with field activities, we definitely want to encourage and engage volunteers. I will say it can be a bit tricky with endangered species, but we always have a lot of outings and opportunities that come up with other critters. But I really appreciate your interest in getting involved. So I would say keep your ear out for future volunteer efforts and outings, and feel free to give your state wildlife agencies a call about red wolves.
Yeah, one of the other things I'll mention too is that we're going to be starting a predator-resistant enclosure program in red wolf country. So we have a similar program in Florida related to Florida panthers, where we help landowners purchase enclosures for their livestock to protect them from predators. And there may be a point where we need some volunteer help installing some of these enclosures on the ground. It's a little ways off. It's going to be happening in the next year, but that might be an opportunity to help hands-on in the field if you happen to be in red wolf country.
Yeah, great to know. I think we've worked through most of our questions. So thank you all for tuning in to this webinar this evening. We really appreciate your interest in potentially advocating for the red wolf. This is a really incredible species that really needs you to lift your voice on behalf of it. We will have more webinars coming up soon through Wolf Park. So please sign up for our email list through our website, wolfpark.org, if you're not already. That way you can stay up to date with us and get notifications when we have more webinars like this. You can also follow us on social media. We are Wolf Park Indiana on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So hope to stay in touch that way. And remember, you can always contact us at Wolf Park or Ben and Tracy and others at Defenders if you are interested in learning more about the red wolf and advocacy efforts. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening. Thanks, Ben and Tracy.
Yeah, thank you all.